Roy Carpenter Jr. Had a theory that was said to have a theory. That's when he started noticing some changes.
In 1905, when they put them in, those were installed in 1905. So
He's around me.
we have aerial photograph back to 1939. I have a hard time believing that that has a big impact because our storm swells come out of largely the southeast, and that is far enough away that it's not changing the refraction pattern significantly. John can chime in. I think actually it's a bigger impact on that stretch of the Tunic. Are the shallow gravel terraces, the surf break in front of the Tunic actually tends to refract the waves, and I think focus some of the wave energy.
We believe that the sand eventually is moving from west to east. It might spend some time moving east to west in places, but it eventually moves west to east. And the reason we think that is from dredging records in Book 2 Pond. And they dredge quite a bit of material, and so in the run-up to the latest dredging, we calculated what it should be, knowing what eroded off the beaches, and we got a pretty good number. So the story is, if somebody throws a sand grain in the ocean at Taylor Swift's place, it's going to end up in the beachway, and it's going to this.
Yep. All right, we got to move on.
Just since we were talking about beach nourishment at Squamish State Beach, why did the Corps choose to truck the sand in as opposed to dredging it in from the shore?
The timeline they had to work with, they didn't have time to go through all the environmental stuff to go look for a suitable offshore site.
And it's not, well, you said shore, offshore. You don't know that there's any there.
Yeah, we're still working on how much is out there that's accessible. But basically, the bottom line is they had a very short window in post-Sandy money. They went on land and got it. Yeah.
This is an unfortunate story of the Corps, and one that we're trying to work with Brett. Corps typically does not do any advanced planning, so they have no idea where any of the sand is, nor do they do any advanced environmental work. So what happens in the event of a storm is you get a dredge that shows up on your door the next day, and they want to know where to get the sand. In New England, I can tell you virtually every nourishment project that occurred in New England was trucked in, whether it was Massachusetts, Connecticut, or Rhode Island. Every bit of it was trucked in. The Corps never did any advanced work to look for any sand source other than that. And some of it was very, very expensive. The stuff in Massachusetts was incredibly expensive because not only did they pay for the trucking cost, but in some cases, each one of those trucks carried a police escort going through the neighborhoods. So the Corps had to pay for all that too.
Has the town of Westerly been provided information on which one of the state beach while you're out there?
Has the town?
Has the town been provided that?
This is great, and now the information we have is internal within the Beach SAMP that we're sharing with you now. No, we have not had an opportunity to brief any of the towns on any of this stuff, really, other than a brief presentation I gave to the town council about a month ago. It is our hope, and what we're seeking now is funding to, as Michelle indicated, to take all the tools that we've developed now and start to train municipal and state officials in the use of these tools and what they mean and how to use them. And then once you get a picture of what your risk is, how do you go about dealing with that risk, which would be sort of a second addition to that. So there's 2 courses that are being planned or fundraising for now to train municipal officials in the use of this information.
The beach profile that we've had since 1996 at South Kingstown Beach has been available to the town of South Kingstown. And we freely turned that information over and provided them with some templates to prior to the moving of not the pavilion, but the boardwalk, and gave them some advice, and they chose not to follow it. So there's no more boardwalk. But that information, yes, that was handed to them. So yeah, it does get through, and whether it gets followed or not is another story.
I think what he's asking about is the profile information that they just got.
I know. Well, that's so new that it's still evaluated.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, at some point in the near future, that information is going to be available. So
Yeah.
Everything that's being done in this project will become public.
All right, so very briefly, let me just give you a quick update on our SLAMM project, or sea level affecting marshes model. So this past winter, we completed an assessment of modeling salt marshes in the state with respect to the impacts from sea level rise. Right here, you can click on that summary report. It's a PDF file. And by the way, I didn't show you the whole page here, but at the bottom of this page, if you scroll down, there's also there's complete map sets for each of the 21 coastal towns. They're in PDF file format, but I will tell you, they are absolutely gigantic in file size, and they'll take you quite a few minutes to download. So if you have a particular community that you're interested in, you can download the PDF, and I would highly recommend that you save it onto your desktop, onto your computer, so that you can just recall it in Adobe Acrobat or any other PDF file reader that you have, rather than trying to download it each time that you want to use it. So back to our final report, our summary report here. There's a lot of good information here, some findings in our report, and I'll just show you one table. This is the net overall change of coastal wetlands, factoring in coastal wetland loss along with coastal wetland gains. And what are highlighted here between Charlestown, Narragansett, South Kingstown, and Westerly, coincidentally all along our South Shore, are the 4 communities that have the greatest overall loss of coastal wetlands under sea level rise scenarios, particularly under 3 and 5 feet. So there's this data and more.
These are my slides, that's okay. I'll talk a little bit about, so the SLAMM effort is really an effort that looks into the future. So it's using data that we have now, taking what we know about predicted sea level rise and trying to forecast what's going to happen to wetlands in the future. Also, for the, since about 2012, we've been working very closely with Save the Bay to look at the existing state of our wetlands that we have now and what the condition is and what kind of immediate changes are we seeing. So that's been an extensive monitoring and assessment program that's been happening in about 40 marshes throughout the state, looking at specific parameters that we think tell us something about sea level rise's effect on our coastal wetlands. And the picture, in short, is not good. So what we're seeing is, even where we show maps of existing wetlands, we know that some of those wetlands are very stressed. They have stunted vegetation. Vegetation is dying off. We see large-scale changes in vegetation communities. And what all of this is telling us is that they're seeing prolonged periods of flooding, more than is typical. So, our theory is that that's due to sea level rise. And this is on top of the multitude of other stressors that our wetlands are facing, drainage issues, human-induced impacts. And so we look at salt marsh restoration to kind of address some of those human-induced changes. So this picture is showing one technique that is used, has not yet been used in Rhode Island, but is used elsewhere to kind of address the effect of sea level rise on marshes, and that is taking dredge material and placing it on the marsh surface to kind of build elevation. So we're not talking about filling to create an upland. We're still talking about keeping it elevations at marsh level, but giving that marsh enough elevation capital that the vegetation can regrow, become more robust, and ideally trap more sediment so that it's self-sustaining. And so this is just a picture that shows that technique here. This is a conceptual plan that shows a project that's being conducted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Narrow River, which we're a partner on. They're leading that project. There's a couple of other techniques that will be used in that project, some drainage enhancements using small creek excavation. But really, this is a technique that we're piloting, hopefully starting this fall. So we've got another project with CRMC that is actually the lead on. We got a competitive grant from the Department of the Interior after Hurricane Sandy to do this kind of sediment placement project in Niagara Pond. So this is the Charlestown Breachway. Our target project area is on this lobe of marsh to the west of the Breachway. And if you look closely, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but you'll see that there are these bright green spots of ponded water here, and that bright green is algae. So these are areas where the marsh has subsided and the vegetation has died off. You've got standing water on the marsh surface, and you've got these filamentous algae blooms in those areas. The temperature of the water in the summer in these areas becomes very high. They're very saline, very inhospitable to fish, and so any habitat value is kind of lost. And so what we're looking to do in this particular project is to take dredged material. We've got some areas in the Breachway Channel that are already permitted to be dredged, and that's part of a previous restoration project that restored eelgrass on these shoals here in the pond. So this is really, it's a sedimentation basin that needs to be maintained. So instead of taking that material and putting it on the beach, this fall we're going to try placing that material strategically on the marsh at elevations that we think will facilitate marsh regrowth. So where we're at with that, we've had a consultant on board and a conceptual design, and we're refining that design. We're in kind of the permitting phase of that project. But and we are going to be looking at two different projects in Quaney and Winnapaw ponds. So getting to the design, the conceptual designs for both of those ponds. And I'm going to be presenting in August, on August 17th at the Salt Ponds Coalition annual meeting, and I'll be going into detail about the nuclear project if anybody's other questions. These are notes. She just put them in a different format. So this is just an example of what I'm talking about, and this is that Ninigret Marsh site. You can see where this is Spartina alterniflora, so the low marsh grass that's recently died off, and areas that are just completely devoid of vegetation. We've had some, during a period of high pressure this spring, we had some really low tides out there after a year of having higher than predicted tides. So many of the areas that have been ponded have now drained, and going out there you can just see where we've lost so much vegetation. And so these are the types of areas that we're really going to be targeting with this project. And here's that algae you can see covering the surface here. And so this just shows where those sedimentation basins are. That's the extent of the area that's permitted for dredging. That would be our sediment source. A similar washover fan in this Ninigret project area. This is from Sandy. And we're seeing the same kind of regrowth there. So it's, in a way, we're trying to kind of mimic that process of sand being deposited and building up the elevation. We obviously, for a place like Quaney, we would want to avoid this. We're not going to be placing sand in this area just because it has the potential to be a washover area. So it's going to be, if this project goes forward, it will be really interesting to compare the two, I think, the natural process versus the dredging.
And what I think is really interesting that Caitlin didn't mention was how much sand you really need to put on these marshes. That just seems, in some places, 10 inches.
Yeah, so
sand, like that's,
oftentimes this is referred to as thin layer deposition, which is a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, studies have been done on marshes throughout Rhode Island, and the general consensus is that our marshes are kind of at the low end. A lot of the marsh vegetation is at the low end of its growing range in terms of elevation within the tidal frame, and so it doesn't have a lot of resiliency or elevation capital. And so sometimes, to get to shooting for the upper range of your target vegetation community, you can be talking about several inches to over a foot. So, which is, it's intensive and it doesn't look great immediately post restoration, but we will be planting intensively and trying to help the process along.
Where else is this process being used in the United States?
Yeah, so it's used pretty extensively in places like Louisiana, and I mean, we're talking, orders of magnitude the size of marshes that we have here in Rhode Island. But closer to home, Jamaica Bay, New York, they've used this pretty extensively. So both the spraying of thin layers of sediment and moving of huge volumes and mechanically spreading with equipment. And both of those techniques have been fairly successful there. There's a big project going on in Delaware Bay right now in the Prime Hook Refuge. We're actually working with somebody from Fish and Wildlife who's involved with that project. He's kind of a consultant on this Ninigret project. But we've seen it work other places. It is kind of a pilot in that it hasn't been tried really anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see. But but we were lucky that this funding became available, and we happened to know the marsh adjacent to the permitted dredge area was in distress, so it might make for a good demonstration project.
Just like the bad bits, was only 118 because we need to get the same out of that investment that's to help with the rest of the farm.
Right. And I should mention that the town of Charlestown especially has been, they are contributing money to the effort. They've been a great partner, and it's nice that it'll be a benefit not only for the health of the pond, but for recreational access, and so it's a win-win.
There's sort of an irony here too, in that Caitlin's actually going to be going to a conference here in New Hampshire, but many of our other New England states are looking at tidal restrictions and trying to figure out how to open them up and increase tidal flow in these areas. We're sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum now, when we're saying maybe we shouldn't be opening up tidal restrictions because we're essentially doing these marshes then to sea level rise. We're at the point where maybe we ought to be looking at restricting some of these openings.
And we've seen that happen in Rhode Island, and Gooseneck Cove in Newport. A tidal restriction was removed there, and in very little time, the marsh completely subsided and was an area with water. And so, yeah, I think, the paradigm is kind of shifting in terms of marsh restoration. It's not to say that we won't be doing any more of those projects, probably not in Rhode Island, but definitely looking at what's happening in our marshes today, these are the types of things we're considering now. And things like preserving and changing land use in the adjacent uplands to provide for future marsh migration. That's a whole new category of project that we're just trying to, starting to explore. So, I'm sure we'll have more information on those types of projects in the future.
I think it's great to see this is an adaptation project in action that resulted in part from the SLAMM mapping work. So it's amazing when you can see adaptation action actually coming about because of the project. I'm going to spend 2 seconds talking about some final adaptation tools, and then we're going to talk Beach SAMP document. We've created a number of other tools geared towards municipalities, waterfront businesses, and coastal property owners. We have a how-to or model process for how municipalities are supposed to use these tools and how they can incorporate them into their comprehensive plans, their ordinances, their planning and decision-making. So this is currently up on beachsamp.org, and we'll be holding a webinar for all coastal municipalities in Rhode Island to really help them figure out how to do this type of work. We've also focused a lot of effort on waterfront businesses. We did a Newport Resilience Assessment Tour where we brought in different experts to look at how can we make Newport waterfront businesses more resilient. So there's a summary report related to that, as well as a catalog of different adaptation options that waterfront businesses can use to deal with stormwater issues, flooding, tidal inundation, and actually this has been shared with all the business owners in Quonset as a way of getting them to start thinking about how are they going to adapt their businesses as sea level rises. And then lastly, coastal property owners, we have a number of different tools. As you'll see out front, we have the Coastal Property Guide, which is basically all 10 questions that you need to know about coastal property if you're going to buy or rent in Rhode Island. And that has been hugely successful. We developed that with the Rhode Island Realtors Association, and they are now handing it out to all of their members, and the real estate agents are sharing that with their customers. And then Fortified, we've talked about a bit about this at other stakeholder meetings, is a retrofit and building design standard. It's voluntary. It's developed by the Institute of Business and Home Safety, and they have different levels for how you can design or retrofit your house or building to be more resilient to coastal storms and flooding. So we are working with them to have Rhode Island be a beachhead or a pilot in the Northeast on how homes and businesses can start to use this to be more resilient. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we've been working with the Rhode Island Buildings Association on this project also. And Dave Caldwell, who's the vice president of the association, actually, we've been just recently trying to pull together some work on the structure that he's currently building in the South County area to see if we can't get it fortified rated. Obviously, he's going to make bronze and probably the silver. The question is whether he's going to make gold right now, but it will be the first fortified, certified structure in Rhode Island very shortly. And the builders, I think, are sort of excited about this and looking forward to building this and marketing this program. We're looking at incentives that could be brought in to help them deal with that in terms of reduced application fees or elimination of application fees or expediting applications that use this fortified system, because it is a plus for the state to have these structures resilient to storms so that they actually don't suffer the type of damage that you would see in a lot of other structures, and therefore keeping our building stock open and available to our residents.